Welcome to Loaded Sport.
Hello and welcome to Loaded Sport. Tonight's episode is sponsored by the number 6. Not only because this is episode 6 of Loaded Sport, but also because it's the number of goals that England put past Iran in their opening game of the World Cup. We've got plenty to get into, and we'll cover everything from the excitement and the hope it brings to the it's only Iran, so don't get carried away, as well as discussing some of your thoughts. Now, before we get through all that and more from this weekend's sport in action, I just want to take a moment to mention that this weekend we had International Men's Day, a day in which we acknowledge men's positive impact on the world. Over the weekend, we set up the Loaded Sport Community Forum on Facebook, a place where not just our listeners, but anyone can find a safe space to discuss sport from around the world and connect with other people. I'm very lucky to have my co-hosts and others to fall back on when I'm having a bad day, should I say, but we understand that not everyone has that. Some people feel alone because they don't feel like they can open up to those around them, but we live in a digital world, and no matter how alone you may feel, there's always someone out there who will be able to listen. So just know that if you are a part of the community, you are never alone. With that said, it's time to get stuck into episode 6. And before I can do that, I need to introduce my co-hosts. And for the first time ever, we have a full house. Joining me tonight, first of all, we have got Adam. Adam, how you doing, mate?
I'm very good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. How was your weekend?
It was very good, thanks.
Mine was good as well. Thanks for asking. Second of all, we've got Muj. Muj, how you doing?
Hey, mate. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
We're a bit gutted Iran lost, to be honest, mate. Didn't you?
The motherland.
Yeah, I'm obviously excited. I want to keep my British passport, so yeah, go England. But yeah, they were solemn night.
Yeah, it's fine, mate. I'm sure you'll have a couple of sleepless nights, and then you'll get over it. Ready for game day 2 in Group B. Kemp, how are you?
Man with the mic, you little Philly cheesesteak, you! I want to put my meat between your buns. Ooh, woo, woo.
Yeah,
how are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. How's your day been?
Yeah,
a bit tired today, aren't you?
Bit tired, but Monday blues, but ready to attack the week.
Yeah, that's it, mate. That's it. And attack this podcast, mate. I can't wait for you to have killed everyone's hopes by the time we're done after today's positive win. And last, but certainly by no means least, lads, can I get a drum roll, please? That'll do. For the first time on Loaded Sport, we've got Sam joining us. How are you doing, mate?
Hello. Yes, I'm very well. Thank you very much. Been eager to get on.
Yes, I know you have, but I'm not going to feel too sorry for you that you've missed the first 5 episodes. You've been living and loving life in Orlando for the last couple of weeks. Talk us through your time away, mate. What were the highlights?
So first day, went into the Magic Kingdom of Disney, had a potter about there, did a couple of the other parks, and then about midway through the holiday, I was actually hit by a big fat hurricane, which was a bit miserable. Hurricane Nicole. So yeah, it's a couple of days we were hunkered down in the room, didn't really do too much. And then once that passed, we resumed play, went back to the Universal side of it, and did a couple of them parks as well. I must say, shout out to the best ride I've ever been on. It's the Guardians of the Galaxy ride in Epcot. Yeah. Honestly, best ride I've ever been on. Katie, I mean, she's a bit of a thrill seeker compared to me. I'm a bit wimpish.
Yeah, shitbag on roller coasters, aren't you?
Terrible, absolutely terrible. Because it's heights, you see, but because that's an indoor coaster and it's like you're coasting through space, you can't really see where you are. Brilliant. And she said it's the best one she's ever been on. So that's told you everything, really.
Yeah, fair enough. What were the food highlights?
Highlight of the food, it would be shout out to Chris Marina, because I went to Longhorn Steakhouse. I haven't really mentioned this in the chat, but that was by far the best meal I had that holiday. And I had a surf and turf, just a little 6-ounce filet, or filet mignon as they say, which was cooked to perfection. And lobster, first time ever trying lobster, and yeah, just like a garlic butter on top, and it were some asparagus with it, and a bit of mac and cheese. Quality, really good.
Yeah,
shout out Chris Marina.
Yes, Tim Bob.
That man does not fuck about when it comes to food.
No. Always got a recommendation on hand, no matter where in the world you may be going. Absolutely. But yeah, really happy to have you, mate, as we all are. And we're excited to get into this episode, and I'm sure we'll get caught up and get the listeners caught up on a lot of your thoughts about some of the things going off in the sporting world at the moment. So let's crack on. Now, we're recording this on Monday night, and currently USA lead Wales with about 15 minutes or so to go, 1-0. But there is only one place to start, and that is England's performance today in Doha versus Iran. 2 goals from Bukayo Saka and a goal each from Jude Bellingham, Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford and Jack Grealish led England starting off their campaign with a 6-2 win. Adam, I'm going to start with you, mate. You have been the biggest proponent of anyone, the biggest shouter of it's coming home. What a start for the lads. Talk us through your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. 6-2 win against Iran. We all kind of had the expectation that we were going to start off with a win. We should ease through these group stages. At the moment, like you say, USA against Wales. Don't think either of those sides are really doing anything that we could consider that's going to be an issue for us. I think against Iran as a team, the work we were doing off the ball as well as what we were doing with the ball, when we come up against tougher opposition, I think we'd still get similar sort of opportunities for us. Maybe the finishes won't be the same, but the fact that, like you said, with Saka, his second goal, he was very composed. When Rashford came on, his goal was very composed. We seemed very confident in what we were doing, pushing forward as well. I think with Maguire and Sterling, 2 players that I think when we spoke on the World Cup podcast, none of us really thought should have been within the starting lineup for England. I don't think either of those 2 really did anything wrong. I know Maguire hit the crossbar, Sterling of course scored as well. Both of those will get a lot of confidence from that, exactly. So they silenced some of the critics there as well. I think defensively we were quite solid. I think we fell asleep maybe once and it led to a goal. The penalty decision still baffles me a little bit. I can see why it was given as a penalty, but I think VAR consistencies means that we should have also had a penalty for the manhandling of Harry Maguire in the first half. So the fact that one was given and one wasn't, granted in a 6-2 win, you're not going to complain too much about it, but if that's against somebody else and it costs you the game, it's a completely different story. But as a team, we were calm, composed, we had a lot of confidence in us there. We've got players who trust each other now. And I think we've got a very good squad to go quite far into this tournament. And I think even against some of the bigger sides, if we've got this sort of confidence that I think some of these players may be lacking before. When you remember Rashford came on to take a penalty against Italy, he won't have been confident because that's the first time he's come on in that tournament. To get players like that on early on in the tournament shows that maybe Southgate's even learned from his own errors in the past. Getting some more of your players a little bit confident heading into later on in the tournament if you need to rely upon them. I know Harry Kane left the stadium today with his ankle wrapped. Maybe that's something that if we do need to worry about. Wilson came on, got an assist. That's something that we can look at, and he's got a little bit of confidence out of that, a bit of game time experience that maybe last year against Panama, I think Harry Kane played the full 90. So it shows that Southgate's maybe learnt a little bit from his mistakes, and hopefully it'll give these players the confidence when we do come up against tougher opposition.
I reckon we can wrap up there, can't we? Adam's just covered literally the entire game.
Yes, well, trust me, you know we're going to get into different opinions on this very soon, and that's the perk of loaded sport. But the question, just follow up that, Adam, you mentioned there about Harry Kane leaving the stadium, and naturally you would assume that Callum Wilson would be the next in line as that out-and-out striker, that man up top. But Marcus Rashford came on today, he's performed very well for Manchester United when he's played as that front man. He scored less than a minute after coming onto the field. Do you think there's an argument for Rashford to be next in line as the man up top ahead of Callum Wilson, should Kane miss a bit of time over the next game, maybe 2, depending on how severe that ankle injury is?
It depends on what sort of approach you want to go for it. I think there's certainly an argument there for why you would start Rashford over Wilson, and I think a lot of people would probably back that argument that Rashford should be the one that's starting over him. To be fair, I'd probably agree with you, but thinking of how Wilson came into the game and the fact that if you're using somebody with the last 20-25 minutes of the game to go, you want somebody with that energy that Rashford has. Wilson's got a similar sort of style to Kane, I think. When he's up front, he's kind of the bully for defenders, isn't he? That can hold the ball up and play that similar sort of style that Kane would. And Rashford has a similar sort of style to what Saka does and what Sterling and Foden on the wings would bring. So I think if you're going to go for a similar sort of style of using the energy towards the end, especially in this heat, yeah, you've got to look towards not necessarily starting Rashford. If you're looking for getting goals early on and putting the game to bed and using that energy from the very beginning, then yeah, possibly looking towards Rashford.
Fair enough. Sam, I'm going to come to you now for your first bit of input into Loaded Sport. talk us through your pre-match thoughts? You didn't get to cover them in the World Cup preview. We've spoken a lot in the chats, but just to fill listeners in, give us a little bit of an insight into where your head was at before the tournament, and also what your thoughts are coming out of the game today.
Yeah, so obviously with the preparation, it wasn't ideal facing Germany, Italy and Hungary and not picking up a win in 6. I was quite doubtful on Sir Gareth and calling for his head, I must admit. But game 1, this seemed to have turned a bit of a corner. We'll see how far we go down that route. But if it is just a matter of being Iran, then so be it. I must admit, the highlight of the game for me was about I think it was about 50 minutes in. This is in the first half, and you hear the chant from "Are you Scotland?" in disguise from the England fans, and it were 3-0 at the minute. That was probably the highlight of my game. It was a shame that Kane couldn't get on the score sheet, but I think he added a lot to it. And
couldn't get on the score sheet, mate. He didn't have a shot. I don't know what it is. Bet365 offered a bet booster, Kane to have a shot on target from 1 to 7 to evens. What is it about any time a bookies offers any kind of bet like that, it does not come in? There is some kind of conspiracy. And for any people that are linked to any bookies that might end up listening to this, I'm on to you, because I'm not having that. 1 to 7 to evens.
I've actually got the name of the conspiracy theorist behind all that. And the person whose fault it is that actually happens. It's a young man. He's based in Brentford, and if you know him, a guy called Ivan Toney.
Right, okay. Is he interfered 232 times by any chance?
Also known as I Bet.
Look him up.
I've heard rumours Qatari royalty paid him off to just not have a ping today.
It's absolutely mental. He had got it. Well, he got an assist, didn't he, for Sterling's goal, but it didn't even get a sniff of a chance. But anyway, sorry about that. I lost my head then when you mentioned that.
That's absolutely fine.
No, I was just going to ask if you got any more thoughts. As you mentioned, not being confident going into the game, and yes, it is only Iran, and yes, we'll get into that when it's Kemp's turn to talk about his thoughts of the game. But where's your confidence level now, based on that level of performance? Seeing how USA and Wales have played each other, is there that little bit of glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this is the right team, this is the right squad to get us over that little bit of a line that we've just fell short of over the last couple of tournaments?
It's a bit early, isn't it? I think it's a bit early. It's Iran. It's a fantastic start. It's exactly what we wanted. I think me and Kemp both said we expected a draw in this game. We were quite negative about it. So, we can't just then say, oh, it's only Iran, because we was expecting a draw. So I'm more than happy with this result. But you've got to take it with some kind of pinch of salt, and we'll see what we really look like Friday against the US. But is that game finished now, Wales?
No, it's currently 86 minutes on the clock, 1-1 as we're recording this. So yeah, it's not over yet.
Yeah, see, I did catch a bit of the first half, and Wales looked awful. I don't know if they've improved much this second half. I know obviously they clearly got a goal back, but they must have made some changes, because they didn't look good at all. And like I think Adam said, either one of them two haven't really shown a lot. So let's see come Friday. It's going to be a completely different ball game, completely different kettle of fish, and we'll see what we've got. And also we need to keep an eye out on whether Harry Kane and Harry Maguire are fit as well, because I think obviously Maguire's going through a concussion protocol, and Kane was seen leaving the stadium I think his ankle was wrapped up. So yeah, we've got to keep an eye on them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with Harry Maguire potentially missing time, that'll put a lot more of a spotlight on Tomori missing the squad. Naturally, I think you would assume Eric Dyer would be the man to replace him, but out of that squad, I'd personally put Ben White above him. But Southgate prefers Eric Dyer based on his international experience, which is fair. But yeah, we'll keep an eye out. I'm sure news will be thick and fast and updated very often with the next game on Friday evening. Much, let's come to you, mate. I know you joked about being gutted that Iran lost, and again, you, like Kemp, have been very much on the side of, let's be realistic about the kind of teams that we're beating and all that kind of stuff. But where's your mind sat after that 6-2 win earlier today?
I'm pretty optimistic about it. I think, obviously in our group chat earlier, we were absolutely rinsing Kemp because, we had an unbelievable performance, and Kemp more often than not isn't the biggest fan of Southgate, as we know from our previous podcasts. I think with this game, the most important thing for me was the young guys kind of stepping up to the big stage. So I think Bellingham was absolutely phenomenal today. And I said Saka would be our X factor. He obviously bagged 2, and he just looked lethal out there today. And I mean, the likes of Rashford and Grealish getting on the score sheet as well, that will do wonders for their confidence. You know, they might have not had the best season for their club, but I think only positives to take out of today. I think at the same time, you have to be realistic. It is Iran, and I think the big test will come up on Friday against the US, or who might not be a top tier team, but they're probably the best competition that we've got in our group. So we'll see if we can follow it up. But no, nothing but positives out of that game. I think as a nation on a Monday, when you're seeing videos of people celebrating in pubs, it's quite a welcoming sight to see that happening. So yeah, a good start to the tournament. But at the end of the day, it was Iran. We'll see how we go on from there.
Fair enough. And you mentioned it'd be a better sign of what's to come based on what happens on Friday. What kind of result or what kind of performance for you personally would make you think, get that energy going and, maybe, just maybe this could be the one? What would you expect to see on Friday for that to happen?
Mate, genuinely, I think out of our group, we need to be getting 9 points. I think in terms of if we consider ourselves to be at that level of the Brazils and the Argentinas to maybe kind of challenge for the World Cup, we have to get 9 points out of this group, because I don't think anyone in that group is on our level in terms of like team depth and quality. And if we're beating Iran 6-2, I expect us to maybe beat the US by 2 goals. And I expect us to beat Wales by 2 to 3 goals as well. So yeah, I think we should be taking 9 points out of our group if we're serious about winning this one.
Yeah, they had a lot of energy going forward and were quite exciting to see once they got into that attacking third. So, yeah, definitely, especially teams against USA and Wales that might be a bit more, they might be set out to be a bit more attacking and not sit as deep as Iran did, especially with the score draw that's currently on the board, 9 minutes added on, so plenty of time for someone to get a winner. But if they come out of this game with a draw, they'll definitely be more attacking, thinking that they're going to have to push for 3 points to stand the best chance of getting out of the group stages, which should only play into England's hands with the pace they've got up top. So that's fine. Now, I'm pretty excited. I was very excited, very impressed by the performance. Yes, it is only Iran, but you can only beat what's in front of you. I was expecting an efficient performance where they got the 3 points, but as I just said there, I thought they were very exciting to watch going forward. And even outside of the goals, some of the passing plays were much more energetic. Jude Bellingham was absolutely phenomenal in the middle of the park. It's someone that can get forward and join that attacking third, as opposed to Calvin Phillips, who, no offence to him, is very much more of a get the ball and distribute and stays in that middle of the park alongside a Declan Rice. So that extra attacking element definitely for me made a difference today. So now we're all excited. Now we seem to have that little bit more of a glimmer of hope about our chances going into this summer. I'm going to pass it on to Kemp now to destroy all that with his, as usual, pessimistic opinions about England and more specifically a Sir Gareth Southgate-led England. So Kemp, over to you, mate.
I honestly think you are so rude. You're just so rude about me, just because I've got an opinion that differs. Honest to God, from what I saw today, and as I mentioned, I was unfortunately in a meeting at work, so I couldn't give it my full undivided attention. I didn't take half the day off like some people hadn't to watch the football. But from what I saw, it was very positive. From what I saw, it was very exciting. And I sort of parrot what you just said there about Jude Bellingham. I think both you've said it, Dawson, and you've said it, Muj. I think he's very, very exciting. And I think he's going to be a superstar in years to come. It's a very exciting team, and this is what I've been screaming out for. Let's play very exciting football. Previous tournaments, we've had the same really core squad that we've got in this tournament, and it's been dreary. It's been 2 holding centre mids. It's been 5 at the back on occasions, and it's been dead. So the fact that we've really put in a shift today and looked fantastic is very, very positive, and I'm very, very happy with the score, even though you boys for some reason seem to think that I like England to lose, which I don't, but I expect it sometimes. I'll never be happy to be more wrong. I'll never be happier to be wrong than if England do really well in this tournament, potentially win it. I've never been happier. Well, I was happy to be wrong today when we drew, when we didn't draw and we won 6-2. I was delighted to be wrong. But it's Iran, and I get it. It's exciting. We played some fantastic football, but you look at Iran, you look at their players. I'm sure none of you boys heard of any of the Iran players before today's game.
They were so poor.
You know, I can't get too excited because the level of opposition that we played against were really poor. I think I said it earlier that they were League One level. I think League One might be a little bit of a compliment to them. They were very, very bad. So while it's very exciting and while I hope England go all the way and bring it home, let's just roll back a bit. Yes, you can only beat what's put in front of you. Most important thing was the win. We got that, and it was emphatic in the end, which is really good, and I'm really happy about that. But let's just hold our horses a little bit and let's not get too excited just yet, boys. That's all I'm going to say on it.
I think from Iran's standpoint, it was just damage control, wasn't it? They weren't really active or looking for a goal. They were just almost
niggly.
Pressure.
So niggly, weren't they?
Yeah. But you know what? I think in terms of this England team, you have to give credit to Southgate in the sense that he's got quite a good eye for maximising the young players, I think. You know, he's been manager now for 3 major tournaments, and I think as an England fan, we should be very excited because you've got the likes of Bellingham, who is going to be a superstar, like Kemp said. Saka is looking lively and deadly on that wing. And then he's also, you know, built it around the likes of veterans like Kane and Pickford. So, yeah, I think it's exciting because, you know, we've got a bright future ahead of us, but we're still kind of got a good chance of winning it all at this moment in time in the
You say that, Mudge, and I agree. It's exciting. We've got some very exciting players, Saka, Bellingham.
We stop saying fucking exciting, please. Jesus.
Can I talk?
We'll put out a post.
Can I talk?
Can I talk? Yeah, you can talk.
Can I talk? Right, shut up then.
If it's exciting.
No, shut up. Thank you. It's exciting. I think we've got some really exciting young players. Bellingham, as you've mentioned, Saka, they've both put in a real shift today, and I do agree. But when you say maximising these players and bringing out the best in these players, in my opinion, the best of these players, especially players like Saka, is going forward. We did that today, and we maximised those players today. But I can't credit Southgate for bringing out the best in these players because for the past 2 tournaments, we've played negative shit football. So I get what you're saying today, and I agree today. We've brought out the best in these boys. But in the last 2 tournaments, I absolutely do not think we've done that. And I couldn't disagree more on that one, Mudge, if I'm honest.
I think that's nitpicking there, mate. You got to remember, a lot of the time, you can't put it all on Southgate as well. A lot of these players have been lethargic as well, like in certain games. Like, you know, I think you got to look at it like we can't be living in 2018 or 2020 or 21.
I know, but you just referenced the last 2 tournaments. So the only thing I'm saying is the last 2 tournaments that you've just brought up and you've just sort of mentioned as him bringing out the best in these players. In those tournaments that you mentioned, we didn't bring out the best in these attacking players.
We reached semi-final and a final.
I know, but we didn't. Yeah, but we didn't bring out the best in these players, which is what you've just said.
So to defend Southgate, though, if you or we or anyone is going to slate Southgate for not bringing out the best in these players, surely when they're playing at their best, like they have done today, you still have to give credit to Southgate.
100%.
Yeah, I agree. I do give credit to Southgate today. I think he did a really good job. Like you say, he brought the best out of the players today. And I saw some really exciting football from some really good players. But you can't say that he's done that in the past 2 tournaments because he hasn't brought the best out in these attacking players. Because we've played such negative football. So you can't say we've brought out the best in these attacking players when we've played such negative football, in my opinion.
I think today it was quite easy for him to go with that attacking option in it. Is playing a team that is obviously studied and he knows they're not very good. So he can afford to play 2 centre-halves. He can afford to not play Calvin Phillips in middle and be a bit more adventurous. It's against sides like USA Friday. Is he still going to stick to that? Or is he going to automatically revert back to a 3 centre-half, back to a second holding midfielder? I think Iran was a bit of a free shot for him, and I think he's got it right. He has got it right.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All we can do is wait and see.
I think you also have to look at it in the sense of, like a lot of these players, if you're expecting them to play their best football in international tournaments at a young age, you're expecting a lot from them. So, you know, like a lot of these players have kind of, you can say they're at their peak age. Like Rashford now, I'd say is in prime, in what should be his prime. So we'll see how he gets on. If Kane is injured, I'd 100% want Rashford up there. I think Callum Wilson is a good player, but I think he's a good impact player. I wouldn't want Wilson starting. I think have Rashford up there, and then have Saka and Sterling on the wings, and see how that goes.
Not having Kane could be a massive loss, I think. I know a lot of people, slate him for dropping a bit deeper, but it actually really worked well today. He dropped deep and he got 2 assists. That one, that one, was it Sterling? Did he play him in and then Sterling finished it on volley?
Yeah,
that was just classic. Kane's drifting out wide and pinging it in. It brings a lot to the team when he does things like that, and I know he gets a lot of stick for it, but it's another dynamic to his game.
Yeah, Rooney did that well, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
Kemp's favourite.
We've not got enough time in the evening to start covering Kemp's thoughts on a Southgate late England and Wayne Rooney, because that's too much negativity for one evening. But I think with
a fucking nightmare, that, wouldn't it?
It would. You look at the starting 11 today, and even the players that came on. These players aren't experienced in terms of age as such. That there's still a lot of young players in that team. Only Kieran Trippier, aged over 30, from the starting 11 today. Well, even for anyone that came on, to be fair, is the only player over 30 at 32. But you look at, or Callum Wilson, sorry, is 30. But you look at a lot of the experienced players; they're still very young. Saka was very exciting in the Euros last year, and missed the penalty in the final, had that massive spotlight and pressure on him. He's only 21. Jude Bellingham, again, as we've mentioned, was absolutely phenomenal today. We know he's only 19. Players like Mount, Rice, Rashford, they're all still 25 or under. So, it's probably one of the main reasons why Southgate has kept them together and picked them, or some of the players, over more sort of the informed players, which I know has been slated a lot, is because they are still of quite a young age, but have got a lot of that sort of bond and tournament experience between them based on the last World Cup and the Euros. But Kemp, I asked the question to Mudge, but I suppose this is a question best aimed at you. But you talked about, yes, they got to the finals in the Euros. Sorry, yes, they got to the semis in the last World Cup, but they've not been able to do it against teams that are of sort of a same level as them. What do England need to do in this tournament, other than naturally win it? What do they need to do in this tournament to convince you that Southgate is or was the right man to lead this team? Is it going to take an exciting 3-2 loss against a team like Brazil in the quarters for you to go, you know what, they went for it and they just fell short? What do they need to do for you to convince you that Southgate is the man to lead this team?
That wouldn't be a bad thing, and it would certainly help in convincing me that Southgate is capable of doing this sort of job. But it wouldn't get me all the way. And I think what would get me all the way is if we got to the semi-final and played against a Brazil or an Argentina, or even if it was the quarter-final and we played against, a France or somebody like that, somebody, top 5 in the tournament, our level or better, and we beat them. We got past them and we beat them. And then we could get knocked out in the semi-final by another fantastic team. But for me, and even though it's not winning the tournament, which I'm sure some people on this call expected me to say the only way I'm going to want him to stay is if we win the World Cup. But actually, if we beat a quality team in the quarter-final, get through to the semi-final, make a really good account of ourselves and then get knocked out, that would fill me with a little bit more confidence that, okay, we've beat a top-quality team. We've got this young side now that are playing really exciting brand of football and they're coming into the prime. Let's go ahead for Euro 2024. And I'd actually be quite enthused and quite looking forward to that tournament more than I have probably in recent years.
Fair enough. Adam?
I think the expectations you've got there to say that Southgate's won your sort of faith, if we've got to beat a Brazil. I think if we can get to the point of facing a Brazil, even if we lost to a Brazil side, if we've taken the game to them and we've lost to a side that is generally the better side, I think the main issue that I've had, that I've kind of come accustomed to with Gareth Southgate, is when we've scored early against Croatia and when we scored early against Italy, we sat back and we kind of invited the pressure from there. If we score early, or even if we don't score at all against Brazil or a side like Brazil, and we take the game to them, would that not be enough to, even if we lost that game, would that not be enough to maybe sway your mind a bit?
No, because he's still not done the biggest thing that I've got a gripe with him for not doing, and that's for beating a side that actually is going to give up, give a bit of a fight and give a bit of a scrap. And I think that sort of goes hand in hand, because I think if we would have played that type of football, and carried on attacking and try and put these teams to the sword, I think we'd have beat them anyway. So that's just tactical that's just a tactical mistake on Southgate's part. And I think if we do go against a Brazil and we do get knocked out, but we play a really fast attacking brand of football, that's brilliant. That's fantastic, and it's progress. And like I just said to Dawson, that would help in convincing me that, might try and tip the scales. But for me, I wouldn't be convinced that Southgate is the person to lead us into the next tournament if we don't get a result or knock out one of the big boys in this competition, because that's the one thing in the history books that Southgate has not done yet. And I don't think personally he will ever do, because he's not got the tactical capability to do so.
Just on the back of that, Kemp.
He beat Germany last year, didn't he?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that Germany side, were they top side?
They were a competitive side.
They were, yeah. I'd put that.
I wouldn't. I don't think I'd 100% go on that one with you. I think they were quite depleted as a Germany side. I think it was the weakest Germany side that we've seen in a long time, personally.
I still think that's a bit of a strong side.
They were strong. They were young. They were young, mixed with a lot, some experience in there as well. I wouldn't say they were weak. They were just kind of like in a rebuild mode, but they were still very, very good.
I wouldn't say they were particularly weak. I'd just say they weren't as strongest Germany side as we've seen before. And again, I don't think they were our equals. I think a lot of people expected, went into that game a bit apprehensive because it's Germany and it's always a difficult game. But actually, in reality, I don't think that many people going into that game thinking we weren't extremely capable of coming out of that with a win.
Where would you rank Southgate in terms of England managers ever? Would you put him in top 5, top 3?
I think you've got to put him in top 5, but that's more of a reflection on the absolute dross that we've had. Apart from Southgate, I mean, England haven't had a very good record with managers. I think you've got to put Alf Ramsey in at number 1 because obviously he won the World Cup, and no manager's done that since. It's difficult.
Does it sit second then?
No, I don't think he does. I think Kevin Keegan probably sits second.
The reason why I mentioned second,
Bobby.
The only reason I mentioned second, because with that win today, Gareth Southgate has 9 tournament wins as an England manager, passing Sir Alf Ramsey. He had 8. They're both tied on 8, and now he is the only England manager with 9 tournament wins, Southgate. Yeah,
and he's done well. He's beat the sides in front of him, but those sides, again, every time he's come up against a decent side, like Alf Ramsey came up against a decent side in the 66 final, beat them 4-2. Southgate is yet to beat a side that we're going to struggle against. Doesn't change anything for me. It's a good start.
Interesting. Well, we'll see how we perform Friday. A positive performance and 3 points against USA. Maybe, just maybe, this time next week, Kemp will be just that little bit more enthused about England's chances heading into their third and final game against Wales on Tuesday night. I'm just going to move on now to some of our listeners' thoughts asked in the community, just for some thoughts and sort of feelings towards England's performance today. So I'll just quickly run through them and get some of your thoughts. I'll start with Kerwin. I will point out, lads, he was a little bit upset by your reaction to his prediction that Canada would be a surprise team. But I said that we'll revisit that once we've seen them play a game or two, and maybe we'll apologise on the show, or more than likely say I told you so. But just I thought I'd put that out there. But he says gloves are off from England, and I can't help but think it wasn't what Southgate wanted, but the lads smelt blood, in my opinion. Saka is a real talent we have on our hands, and so happy that the Euros didn't ruin his confidence. Definitely agree with that second part there. But Muj, I'm going to come to you on that first part. Kerwin seems to think that Southgate would have sent them out to take a bit more of a conservative approach and, again, as I predicted, an efficient but not exciting result. But when they saw how Iran were set up, they maybe went a little bit out of their own way to put in the kind of performance that we would hope, considering the talent. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think Southgate was the one that set up that game plan and had them playing how they did, or they just sort of took it into more of a training atmosphere after those early goals in the first half and looked as exciting as they did off their own back?
I think it's 100% intent from Southgate. I mean, it has to be, because at the end of the day, your players, you'd have to listen to what your coach or your manager's game plan is. And I think, to be honest, in terms of Southgate for this tournament, it's almost like if he doesn't do well, he'll have to kind of go out on his sword. So I think he's just telling the lads, like, look, come on, let's let's show them who we are. You know, we're here to. They're counting us out. Let's show them. Let's see if we can make a run at this. And from what I saw today, honestly, nothing but positive things. And I think that trickles down from him as well as to how the players are reacting to him as well. You can see that they still kind of believe in him as the England manager. And yeah, I mean, in terms of, was it a situational thing? I don't think so. No, I think they knew that Iran were going to try and sit deep, and it was just a matter of pressing on and eventually breaking through. And they did that 6 times today.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on this one. Adam, I'm going to come to you for the next comment. It's from Kieran. He says, great performance led by Jude Bellingham, running the show. What a player. Future England captain for sure. 19 years old, a lot of hype around Bellingham with his performances, not only in the Bundesliga, but in the Champions League as well. He's led and captained Borussia Dortmund a couple of times so far this season. What do you think about Bellingham's performance today? First goal for England, the first player born in the 2000s to score in the World Cup. Where do you see his future in terms of not only international football, but certainly from a club perspective as well? Surely a big move on the cards in the not so distant future.
Yeah, I think he had a class game today. I think when he moved from Birmingham to Dortmund, there was always that kind of like, why have they spent so much on this guy? And then he's kind of answering those critics quite well, isn't he? And then there's an opportunity now for him to maybe get a bigger move to the Premier League. I think Liverpool on a couple of occasions have been looking towards him, and I think somebody like him would suit that team quite well. I think in terms of his performance today, he was simply faultless. He got his goal, he grew in confidence further from there, and you could tell what it meant to him to get that goal at the age of, did you say 19? At the age of 19 to get that goal. And then, like from there, just went on with confidence. He worked well alongside Rice. He continued to push forward. He was creating opportunities. He wasn't afraid to get stuck in and win the ball back for England. He made, I think in the first half, there was one touch that was a bit too heavy, and then he just absolutely threw a challenge in to win the ball back for England, and it led to a goal up the other end for Sterling. So I think his confidence will only grow throughout the tournament, and I think these sort of experiences now means that when it comes towards Harry Kane's time to maybe give up the armband or retire from international football, you've got a captain there with a lot of experience and a lot of ability to help lead England on to the next generation as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you know, with him at 19 years old and Declan Rice, despite his experience, still only 23 years old, I think England might have just found their new centre midfield partnership for the next 10 years and at least the next 2 or 3 major tournaments, but we'll see. Kemp, I'm going to come to you for this one, and I'll get you to answer the second part of that question to Adam on Jude Bellingham. Where do you see his future in domestic football? Again, he's with Dortmund. He's getting a lot of hype, a lot of praise for what he's doing. What kind of money can you see him going for in the future? And, you know, what kind of team do you think can afford to pay that?
It's difficult because who's got that sort of money? His asking price is going to be crazy. There's only certain clubs in the world at the minute that can afford that sort of money. It's not just on transfers, it's on wages as well. How much money is he going to be commanding? You look at a player like Haaland, who, to be fair, City did really well with his transfer fee, but his wages are astronomical. So Premier League is likely. Is it going to be Liverpool with the FSG situation, which is what was heavily rumoured? You know, I don't know. But for me, Real Madrid is always, you know, they're always lurking in the background thinking, you know, can we sort of put our 2 penneth in and see if we can, you know, lure them to the Galacticos style of things. But it's difficult. I can't see past Real Madrid. I think Liverpool was likely the destination, but I think the way the owners and the financial situation is there, I think it's unlikely. So I think, unfortunately, the English lad who went away to Germany to become a man, I think he's going to stay away on the continent, and I think he's going to be a Real Madrid player and possibly a Real Madrid legend.
Yeah, I've got City or Madrid pegged as probably the 2 sides that can afford to pay what they need to pay and also be, you know, a sort of a destination that Jude wants to go to himself. I'm just very quickly going to get your thoughts, Kemp, off the back of Aaron Law's comment. He's just put Jude Bellingham, that is all. I think that pretty much sums up his performance today. Big shout out to Iliman Ndiaye as well, Sheffield United player in the Senegal squad. Didn't get any minutes today, but what kind of impact do you think he could make on the World Cup, if any, for a player that's currently playing in the Championship?
Well, he's shown so far this season for the Blades that he's a very, very exciting attacking player. He's not shy of getting stuck in and, really throwing his weight about, using his physicality and his speed and getting beyond the last man. It's going to be difficult for him to get in the side. He is still very young and he's very inexperienced at that level. It's fantastic that he's gone and he's part of the squad and he's in the tournament. I think in terms of minutes, it is going to be difficult for him. But yeah, what an experience it is for him, and hopefully it means that he can come back to the Blades in the new year with a refreshed sense of wanting to do really well for us. So very talented player, Iliman Ndiaye, really, really good, mindset, and he seems like a very down to earth young lad. And I think the experience just by being out there and just being in the squad will be really valuable to him. And I think you can expect to see him as a very early name on the team sheet in tournaments to come when he's matured a little bit.
We'll see how that benefits Sheffield United as the season goes on. Next up is Gareth Jones. I'll take this one. Saka was class. Him on the right, get Foden on the left with a fully firing Kane through the middle, and who knows where we could go with this. Definitely agree on Foden being in the starting 11. I personally put him in more of a central role over Mount. I think Raheem Sterling, with that pace that he offers up front, saw what they can do today with that forward three. Foden, very good on the ball, very good in small spaces. I definitely think he would be the key between unlocking defences with through balls and all that kind of stuff. So for me, Foden should be starting. I do agree with that, but I'd put him in a more central role ahead of Mason Mount. Sam, I'm going to close off with you on the last comment purely because you're a United fan, like the person that put this comment. Paul Martin said, "Let's throw a cat amongst the pigeons. Rashford over Saka." What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that I've not been a United fan since I was a kid, mate. I've been a Derby fan, so I don't know where you've got that one from. But I think I responded to him. I think it's absolutely crackers to say that Rashford deserves a place over Saka. Saka scored 2, didn't put a foot wrong. Cracking volley, to be fair. I don't know what more you could ask for him from it was his first World Cup game as well. I think I seen a stat earlier that said he scored 2 World Cup goals in one game, and Rooney's only scored 1 World Cup goal in God knows how many games he featured. So yeah, I don't think he deserves to be dropped anytime soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Saka, I'd put it in the community that him and Jude, I think, are going to be key to England's attacking performances this tournament, and they showed that today. But again, it is only a round. We move on to Friday with what should be a tougher test against the USA. 7:00 kickoff Friday night. So what a way to potentially start the weekend on a great note. Just very quickly, we'll cover the results so far from the rest of the tournament. Let's be honest, that England game earlier today is probably the best game for a neutral so far because the quality of football hasn't been great, and certainly the atmosphere and the attendances haven't helped with that. Start with the opening game. Ecuador beating Qatar, the host, 2-0. Qatar, to be honest, I would love to see what kind of level they're at in terms of the English league system because the standard was absolutely terrible. Ecuador were very easy winners, but Muj, what do you reckon, mate? I know we spoke about the corruption, we spoke about the money, but Qatar is surely not doing anything for the rest of the group stages and the rest of their tournament.
No, I think it was stated, wasn't it? The opening nation had never lost the opening game. So that the nation hosting had never lost the opening game. And if Qatar had won, then I think there definitely would have been some questions in regards to their win. But no, I don't think Qatar are going to get out that group. I think, it's written in the stars for them. Sadly, I think they're going to lose all 3 games.
They were pretty awful.
Not great at all. I think they've got Netherlands next, which, depending on how much Netherlands want to push, it could be quite embarrassing. But yeah,
you say that they were pretty bad today, weren't they? I think they were quite fortunate to win 2-0 today.
Yeah, 4:00 kickoff today. The second game of the day after the England match was Netherlands against Senegal. Netherlands won 2-0, but they were 2 late goals. Gakpo scoring in the 84th minute to open the scoring, and Klaassen scoring deep into injury time in the 99th minute. So yeah, 2-0 on the face of it looks like a pretty comfortable win, but both goals scored very late on. And I watched the game. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty poor game. To be perfectly honest, a lot of people have got Netherlands pegged as going quite far based on the squad they've got. But
just about to say, we've got someone pegging Gakpo as a one to watch breakout, haven't we? Who's that? Who's I think one of our fans, was it?
Yeah, someone on the Facebook community page, Daniel Alton, said in response to my question about breakout players, said that he was a massive fan of Gakpo. So good start for that prediction there.
Great shout.
Yeah, definitely. He's been playing phenomenally well for PSV this season. And the third and final game for today, we spoke about it a couple of times, but it has now finished. USA drawing 1-1 to Wales. USA looked like the strongest side in the first half. Timothy Weah scoring 10 minutes before half-time to put them in the lead, and Gareth Bale scoring a penalty with around 10 minutes left to go, getting them a point, which, again, as I mentioned earlier, a point for each of those two games now surely plays to England's advantage, as they're going to have to be a bit more attacking. So, Kemp, I'll come back to you with this one. USA, Wales both starting off with a point. You would now naturally assume they're going to have to push and attack against England. Where do you see the chances, or how do you see that approach playing into England's hands?
I think it bodes really well for England, to be fair, no matter how we set up. Even if Southgate reverts back to type and we sort of sit in a little bit and try and catch him on the break, I think that works pretty well, especially if we've got Harry Kane, who's potentially not playing in the next game. I do think that would sort of suit a more direct counter-attacking approach if those teams do want to come on to us. But I don't think it's going to change the approach dramatically. I think if you look at it from their perspective, they've got what should really be a banker against Iran after the performance that they put in today, and then they've going to have to rely on the other team getting a result against England, which based on today's performance is not going to be an easy thing to do. So I think England can look at it in a sort of no lose situation. Really, I think it doesn't matter how they play or what they do. I think it plays into our hands, especially if Iran somehow manage to get, a miraculous point in their next game. I think the next two games definitely play into our hands if that's the case. So I think it's been a good result for us today all round.
Good. I'm glad you finally lightened up about England's chances, you dickhead.
Yeah. I will say this about England's performance today. It's made me believe that they can go deeper into the tournament. Now, that's not.
We should go deeper into me.
Yeah, mate, just ask. I genuinely, it's not about getting ahead of myself, but I think it's more to do with the fact that this team played better than I thought they would as a collective. Like, they just absolutely ran the show, like, on the attack. And, I wasn't really giving them too much of a chance. I said quarters, but, if the young players can kind of step up and, just kind of keep performing the way they did against Iran. I know it's not the biggest opposition, but there are a lot of positives today to take, and it's made me a little bit more optimistic about the tournament outcome for us.
I just think try not to be too cute. We've just had a cracking result. Don't change it. If everyone's fit and everyone's available, just don't change it. Just copy and paste that team, go out again and go and do exactly what you just did then against them. Don't let them dictate to what you're going to do. It's only, I don't want to say it's only the USA, but, it's not like a France. It's not, they shouldn't ever dictate to how we want to play or set up. I think we just set up and let them dictate to us. Let them look at our team and think, well, that's how they're saying, we have to make our changes there. I think just go and play how you did today. I don't think they'll have much trouble, especially seeing that first half, that Wales-USA game.
Keep it simple, in my opinion. I think if you're a tactical genius like Kevin Keegan, I think you can start, moving things about and see if you can sort of, tactically outwit them. But if you go with Southgate, copy and paste, Sam. I completely agree.
Didn't he quit on the shitter?
Like, no, that was Elvis.
I think on a stopwatch, Sam, you just got in there before Kemp, so you get to claim that one. One of the questions in the community forum was from Aaron about the lineup on Friday. And, do we stick with the same lineup? There's a lot of talk about Mason Mount. Should there be players in over him? Sterling with the form he's been in. And there was a lot of the talk and the main talk going into the game with the rumoured lineup last night. So we'll get more into that in the preview show later in the week with England next playing Friday evening, especially when we should be a bit more clearer on injury news with Maguire and Kane as well. So yeah, for the preview show, we'll really get stuck into what you said.
Can I just jump in on that?
Go on.
Just about Mason Mount, because I know he gets a lot of flack, and he is getting a lot of flack again today for disappearing a lot of game. And against teams like this, maybe he's not the best choice because you could stick anyone in there; they're going to do a job. But against these big teams, I think against Germany, last Euros, them big teams, that's when his value comes in. You see it; he does so much running, and he leads the press, and that's where I think his value is. Now, I know he's not absolutely gifted quality-wise. He can take a free kick, to be fair, but where his value is, it's leading that high press, and I think that's where Southgate loves him so much because he can get us on front foot, eye up the pitch. And I think that's where his value comes in. But against teams like this, you can use him obviously as a high press against Iran, and obviously that's exactly what they did, and they bottled it. But I think his value will come into it more against the bigger teams.
Would you put him in your starting lineup for Friday, Sam?
Yeah, I would. I'd literally keep the exact. If every player was available to me, what played today, I'd just play the exact same. And the substitutes come on, and they were fine. But I don't see any reason to change it. You're going to get much more of a test on Friday, and that's when we are going to need to, use that press very well. And I think he's key to using that press.
Problem is, if you change it, and I don't know if you agree, Adam, but we've just absolutely battered a side in the World Cup, and again, it's Iran, it's the team that you come up against, but we've had a fantastic performance. It's probably the best England performance in a long, long time. Taking out the opposition, it's still a very positive performance. How can you take any player out of that and look them dead in the eye and say you don't deserve to play next week? Adam, agree?
I do agree, yeah. For me, Foden should be starting above Mount in general, but after you put in a performance like that as a team, and it's the bigger picture, isn't it? As a collective, the team's performed very well today. It would be very difficult to turn around and say to Mason Mount, you shouldn't be in that starting lineup. He didn't perform great, but like Sam said, he'll be much more important later on in the tournament when you've got to do that high press on a more consistent basis. And that's where players like Foden, Rashford, Grealish will be a bit more important coming off the bench when you've got to be more consistent with the high press later on in the game, and I think that'll be important. Yeah,
it just shows the depth that England have. That when Phil Foden's on the bench, it says a lot, doesn't it, about the team quality?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that pretty much covers everything and anything that we can discuss about England. One more team that I want to cover. This is for Mudge's benefit, but England aren't the only team to have got a really positive win over this weekend. Chesterfield in the National League won 2-0 at home to Solihull Moors, and with Notts County, who were in second, are still in second, only getting a point. Chesterfield now sit 5 points behind that second place with a game in hand, and only 6 points behind Wrexham, also with a game in hand. So, Adam, as a Chesterfield fan, and a lot of listeners that are interested in low league football, I know Mudge is the expert on that level, but Adam, I am going to come to you as a Town fan. What's your thoughts on those three results this weekend and how that stands for Town going into the second half of the National League?
Naturally, they help us massively. A win in our game in hand, and we go to 3 points behind Wrexham. We've already beaten them once this season. We can close that gap even more. I've always said that it'll be between us and Wrexham for the title, because I think with Notts County, as well as they're performing, they've got a likelihood that in January their top goal scorer is going to go. And we've already spoken about Langstaff leaving in January. We've spoken about the potential of Shamanga leaving in January. But with Shamanga, it's going to be a case of going on what's happened in the past, because he's not been playing too much for us since he came back from injury. Whether that's a tactic from Cook to make sure that he doesn't go in January, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's good. We're back up into contention for fighting for top of the league. And we're moving further away from fourth place, so it's ideal.
That's good to hear, Adam.
Fucking hell, that could put a glass eye to sleep, that could.
I tried not to go on too long because I don't want to upset Mudge again.
You and the other 4 listeners who are probably Chesterfield fans will be really excited about.
Everyone else has switched off now, haven't they? That's it, they're gone.
Big Gazza.
We've got Big Gaz joining us for the end of season review when Town get promoted. So,
no.
That's
all getting banned.
Everyone busy that weekend, yeah?
Yeah, I'm washing my that weekend.
Banned before we even started.
Well, that covers this weekend's football. Again, the highlight being England's performance today. We will now, after the break, move on to discuss this weekend's F1 action with the season finale in Abu Dhabi, and also what is Sebastian Vettel's legacy. Welcome back to Loaded Sport. It's time to get into this weekend's action from the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in the Formula One. Joining me and Adam to go through it is our resident F1 expert, Josh. Josh, how are you, mate?
Very well, thank you.
Good. So, last race of the season, there's plenty to discuss, I think more so from an overall season perspective, but we'll get stuck into that. First of all, though, top 5 in Abu Dhabi. Max won yet again his 15th win out of the 22-race season. Leclerc in second, securing second place in the championship, just beating out Sergio Perez in third in both the race and the overall standings. Carlos Sainz in fourth, and then George Russell for Mercedes in fifth. So, Adam, I'll start with you before we get into Josh's even more short technical and respectable knowledge of the race and the sport. But Adam, what were your thoughts on the final race of the season?
I think you're always going to have entertainment on the final race of the season, and I think that's been drawn up even more with what happened with Red Bull on the penultimate race of the season just a week ago. We look at the fact that the championship is over, but there was still second place to fight for, and the animosity between Max and Perez kind of made this a bit more of an intriguing race more than anything, wasn't it? But you look at the results, like you say, Verstappen won, Leclerc finished second. Therefore, regardless of what would have happened last week, Perez wouldn't have finished second place overall. I think the race is what it is. It's just one of them things, isn't it? Last race of the season, you're always going to have that worry that there's not going to be too much to fight for. But we've still got a little bit of entertainment from what went off with Max and Perez, and of course the fact that the great one didn't even finish.
The great one indeed, and we'll get into that very shortly in my next talking point. But Josh, what were your thoughts? I know we spoke last week about a lot to do with the fallout from the Brazil Grand Prix. How would the Red Bull relationship potentially affect the overall standings? But I don't think there really was much. Leclerc got second place, I think fair and square. There wasn't really any drama. So what are your thoughts on the final race of the season to conclude Formula One in 2022?
Yeah, the Red Bull stuff sort of petered out very quickly. They had a team photo on the Thursday to show some unity and to declare that they'd put the Brazil incident behind them both. And from there they went into practice and qualifying and just absolutely obliterated the opposition. 1-2 on the grid in qualifying, and then in the race, very well controlled, and they tried another strategy with Sergio and narrowly missed out on that P2 in the championship. But again, Max just absolutely dominated that race and never looked like he was going to be beaten.
Yeah, and that pretty much sums up the whole season, as I mentioned a minute ago. 15 wins he got from this season. So yeah, a very dominant and much more conclusive championship victory than it was last season under the circumstances. So, Adam, just to go back to your point earlier about the golden boy of the sport, Lewis Hamilton finished the season on a DNF. And I think that just as much as Max winning pretty much perfectly sums up the season that he's had. His first ever season in Formula One without a race win. Now, Josh, being a Mercedes fan and a Lewis fan, where do you think that puts his mindset going into next season, coming off the back of technically his worst ever season in the sport?
I think his mindset's good. He was saying in his post-race interview how much he was looking forward to next season and to go again with a more competitive car. He did say that the W13, this season's car, didn't deserve to win a race, and that it wouldn't be one he'd necessarily keep in his collection. So obviously there is that disappointment that it didn't work out this year, but he was generally quite happy, surprisingly upbeat after the race, and I think that just shows you where he is, and he's already focused on next year.
Yeah, probably more of a just happy that it's over than a frustration as to how it's gone, because it's been pretty obvious for quite a few months now that they're not going to be competitive, and it is going to be a focus on next season. So yeah, I would agree with that. what you said there about him being upbeat is definitely more of a thank God that's over. We can move on now, and not. I think the frustration has long gone in terms of their performance this year. Adam, McLaren finished on a very positive race. Both drivers getting the points. Lando Norris finished with fastest lap. We know Ricciardo is now no longer a McLaren driver. Lando is clearly the future of that team. Where do you see the team's chances for next year? Positive couple of seasons, much better than what they have done pretty much since Lewis left. But going into next season with two young drivers, one being a rookie, where do you fancy their chances in terms of the best of the rest on the grid going into 2023?
I think we've got to be favourites as one of the best of the rest. Obviously, we're still quite we're quite a distance, should I say, away from your Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, and that speaks for itself. But like this year, we've already had a 1-2 that we managed to somehow get ourselves out of absolutely nowhere. I'm sad to see Ricciardo go. I think he's a great personality to have in and around the paddock. I think he's somebody that's still got a lot to offer within Formula One. He's gone to Red Bull as a number 2, as a reserve driver, if you will. But do we think that's going to stay? When it comes to the time that Max and Perez reach boiling point and Red Bull have to make a decision, are they going to keep Max or are they going to keep Perez? They're going to keep Max, which means then it's Ricciardo's route back into Red Bull. There was something in his contract when he joined McLaren that if Red Bull or Mercedes offered him a contract, we would waiver the right for any sort of fees to be paid. He would be allowed to leave and discuss with those two teams. So I think that speaks for itself. If the opportunity was to arise at Red Bull, maybe he expected it to be more of a number 1 or a number 2 driver than a reserve driver. What we've got with the two young drivers at the moment is literally just that, two young drivers. We don't have a car that can compete on a regular basis. We've seen a couple of races this season where we've been there or thereabouts. We've seen a couple of races this season where we've been absolutely nowhere near and we've been somewhat off the pace. So I think we've got two drivers that we need to get a bit more experience. Lando's got a couple of years now. He's got a little bit of experience. He's worked with some very good drivers. He's worked with Alonso. He's worked alongside Button as well. Now with Ricciardo. Now he's the little bit of experience we're going to be turning to help Piastri kind of ease himself into Formula One. Hopefully he hits the ground running and there's not going to be too much work that needs to be done there. But I think with Lando trying to show some of that experience, I think we're looking in and around, 7th, 8th, sometimes the latter stages of the points. I don't think we're going to be breaking into the top 6, even with the occasional DNF. We've got to look at some of the other sides that are around there at the moment. Alpine, of course, one of those that have been there or thereabouts this season, fighting for us as best of the rest. Ferrari now, from last year, they've took off. They're now one of the better sides in Formula One. Mercedes, let's be fair, if they take another downward spiral, they'll be there battling with us, but can we really see Mercedes taking another downward spiral? Now, I think after what's happened at the end of this season, Lewis has said that enough's enough. He's going to focus on getting the car better. George Russell's outperformed him. If there's one thing I do like about Lewis Hamilton, and you'll not hear me say much to compliment the guy very often, it's his determination and his desire to win. You don't win as much as he has without that sort of fight and grit and determination. And he's had a bad season. Loads of Formula One drivers do. Loads of Formula One teams do. But it's really how he reacts to that now this season. He's got that fire and that hunger now to go back at Max. Max has won his first legitimate championship, if you will, from everybody that's been complaining that the one last season wasn't a legitimate championship. He's won one now. This is the big battle. Lewis against Max. They've got the entire of this pre-season, this off-season, if you will, to prepare a Mercedes car. They've got a driver that is capable of winning that championship in Lewis Hamilton. To be fair, you could argue that they've got one in George Russell. Bottas maybe wasn't the number 2 driver that they needed. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton have got that sort of ability to both be number 1 drivers. Can they coincide if it was a case of this could be Lewis's last hurrah, potentially? And you could see George, when push comes to shove, him helping Lewis just the way that Perez has helped Max. Could you see Lewis doing the same for George Russell? Absolutely. I think Lewis has got that experience now to know that it kind of works as a team as well as an individual. And I think both of those two are going to be up there or thereabouts alongside Max and Perez. And I think we're going to be looking at another Red Bull against Mercedes come towards the end of next season.
Definitely. And as we've already discussed, Mercedes are clearly confident and much more excited going into next year. They seem to know where they stand with the quality of the car. So, yeah, you said it yourself. Every driver has had a bad season at some point. those that are well remembered, this is Lewis's first and worst season of his career so far. So next season will be a true test of how he responds to that. And yeah, it'll be very exciting to see. So just talking about legacies and talking about the future and going into next season and Max Verstappen and the future of Red Bull with Ricciardo joined as a reserve driver. Max Verstappen was quoted in an interview after the race this weekend as saying that his current contract with Red Bull could potentially be his last, and it is something that he's constantly thinking about. It's currently due to run out in 2028, so he's got another 5 seasons, but he has said that at the age of 31, he could walk away from the sport and retire, as there are other things that he wants to do. So he's currently sat on 2 championships. With another 5 seasons, he'd have to go on a legendary run to tie Lewis's and Schumacher's current record of 7. But let's assume for a moment, and let's live in a hypothetical world that says that Max Verstappen does retire in 5 years. And Josh, I'll start with you for this one. Where would you see Max Verstappen standing in the F1, sort of standings and rankings all time? But where would you see that sitting in 5 years' time, assuming that he does retire at the age of just 31?
Well, he's already very, very high up on the list of Formula One greats, and he's only just getting started. 2028, 5 years' time, he targeted getting about 4 championships in that time. In years gone by, he's been quoted as saying that. So if he can get his 4 championships at least and call it today, I think he'd be very happy with that. But does he want to go longer? Does he want to do what Lewis Hamilton's done, what Michael Schumacher's done, and go into the late 30s and early 40s? Who knows? He might change his mind on that. But he's said he would be happy to go at 31 and concentrate on other things. I think he's got every right to do that. But I'd like to see Max in the sport for the foreseeable future. It makes the sport more exciting, makes each individual race more exciting when he's up against the best. And you see these battles with Lewis and Max last year especially, and it was absolutely enthralling. It was brilliant to watch, and I've sort of missed that this year. But the longer he's in the sport, the better, I'd say.
And me as a Red Bull fan, I would definitely agree with that. You want the best drivers in there. Someone like Nico Rosberg, won the title and dipped. So we never got that follow-up. We never got that big, right, someone's beat Lewis. What is Lewis going to do about it? We never got that opportunity. We've now got that with Max going back-to-back, and Mercedes, you would expect having a much more competitive car. But drivers like Lando, drivers like George Russell, should I say, all these young drivers that are just starting, Leclerc as well, of course, finishing second in the standings, all these young drivers that are now really starting to elevate themselves and develop and will naturally only get into better performing cars as the years go on. It's very interesting to sort of think where the sport will be and how the standings will look like in the next 3 to 5 years' time. So assuming that all these drivers that are currently young and developing and not quite at their peak yet, you would assume that in sort of 5-6 years' time, they really would be at that. So it would be a shame that if at that point Max does decide to walk away. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of talent on the grid when that time comes. So I'm sure we won't miss him too much, but time will only tell. Speaking of legacies, moving on to someone who has one of the best legacies in F1 history, massive contributor to Red Bull's Formula One history and legacy. It is the retirement this weekend of Sebastian Vettel of Aston Martin. His last race in Abu Dhabi. He's now walking away from the sport. 4-time world champion, winning all of those with Red Bull in the early 2010s. Lads, where do we see his legacy? Naturally, he's took a bit of a step back these last few years, moving to sort of the lesser teams after leaving Red Bull. But you can never deny and you can never forget about a driver that's won 4 championship teams. So, Adam, what do you think, or what to you as an F1 fan is the legacy of Sebastian Vettel?
I think him alongside Lewis Hamilton defined an era in Formula One. I think it was the back stages of the noughties, the beginning of 2010s, him and Lewis were having such a battle. It was so entertaining to watch. And I remember my favourite season of Formula One to ever watch was the final race of the season. Saw either Vettel, Webber, Hamilton, Alonso, Massa, or Button. Any of those 6 drivers could win the championship on the final race of the season. And I think it was the first corner that Vettel had spun off, and it was almost game, set, and match that it was going to somebody else. But he fought so resilient to get himself back up there and get the result that he needed to make sure that he was the world champion. And like I say, he defined an era with Lewis Hamilton. He helped Red Bull put themselves on the map. He helped shape that team up to what we know them as today. Because let's be fair, before then, they were a Formula One team, but did they really have much success? Did they really have much expectation? No, a young Sebastian Vettel came onto the team from Alpha Tauri or whatever they were known as back then as well. And he helped lift that team. And he helped get Red Bull to where they were and the heights that they were at. And him and Christian Horner had such a companionship that really, really lifted the sport, the team, him as an individual. And I think without Sebastian Vettel having that sort of ability and battling with Lewis Hamilton, I don't think Lewis would have won as many as he did. And I don't mean that in a case of course, obviously, Vettel won his 4, then Lewis went on, and whilst he were at Ferrari, they battled even further. But I think Lewis became a better driver for the battle that he had with Vettel, just as Vettel became a better driver for the battle that he had with Lewis. And I think helped lift both of their careers and catapult them to what they've both got to. Can I see Lewis doing a similar sort of thing to Vettel? No. I think Lewis is at a point now where, as a former world champion, he's still with Mercedes. He's still got that ability to carry on pushing forward with Mercedes. I think when his contract runs up and he makes the decision, and if he's not offered a new one by Mercedes, I think he calls it a day in Formula One. He wants to create his own team. He wants to help out in a different way to what Vettel has. Whereas Vettel's gone to, after leaving Ferrari, he's gone to Aston Martin and Alfa Romeo, and he's helped that team try and shape their future as well. So he's really tried to help teams within Formula One, whereas Lewis is trying to help the youth of the entire of motorsport, which is understandable. They've both gone down different routes, and nothing's wrong from either of them. I think Vettel's still going to go on and offer that same sort of thing, but I think his legacy is he's a 4-time world champion. I believe he was the youngest world champion at the time, the first to win it 4 consecutive years since Michael Schumacher. I think he made a very big statement, and I think he's certainly one of the greats. You can't win 4 in a row without being considered a great, or 4 championships at all without being considered a great. And I remember seeing something on Sky Sports F1 where they had to name the champions consecutively going back from the most recent year, and I think Vettel was the only one that managed to name every single one of them. The guy's knowledge of the sport is incredible. I'd love to see him in a punditry role afterwards. I'd love to see him give his take on different races. But it's the stuff that he's done off the track as well. He's gone and he's helped Aston Martin, but I think it was at Silverstone. He stayed behind and helped clean up the stands afterwards. It's the stuff that he's done for charity and support of other causes. I think he's used his celebrity status to really help not only himself but others as well. And I think both on and off the track, Seb's proved to himself. Even the people that didn't like him whilst he was dominating the sport, and some people may say that made it boring, those people would be me as well. I think that he's really proved those sort of people wrong, and as a person, he's much better than what you see on the track.
I would say that those people that blamed Vettel for making the sport boring are massive hypocrites for supporting Hamilton, and by that I mean Gaz, of course. So, but Seb could only ever do what he did on the track. It's not his fault if other teams weren't as competitive or whatever it may be. He is the reason that I am an F1 fan. When I first started getting into the sport, he was absolutely fantastic. He was this trailblazer who was really, like you said, Adam, bringing Red Bull up to sort of the top of the top tier of F1 teams. And yeah, he's the reason why I'm a Red Bull fan to this day. And yeah, his legacy will be just as a great guy that was a massive influence. That, again, I think you said it perfectly, Adam, defined an era. And yeah, I'm sad to see him go, but I hope he enjoys his retirement. And yeah, completely agree. I think he'd be a great pundit, similar to Tony Romo in the NFL, just getting a real expert insight into what goes into delivering at the highest order on the track. So we'll see what he decides to do in the future. Josh, as a Mercedes fan, as a Lewis fan, as someone that for quite a long time was a thorn in Lewis's side, where would you put Seb's legacy?
Well, it ranks amongst the absolute best in Formula One. The sporting results for the last 2 years at Aston Martin may not have been what he wanted or hoped for, but it's completely irrelevant when you look at the peak of his career and what he did with Red Bull. He could string 10 or more races together and get 10 victories in a row for that team at his prime, and he was just absolutely relentless. No one could touch him in qualifying in the race, no matter what McLaren or Ferrari tried. It was always Sebastian and Red Bull more often than not. So absolutely dominant and relentless at his peak, and he was just very wise and very very well technically minded, very knowledgeable about his race car from the start of the season to the finish, and that's why he was so successful year in, year out. And yes, he had battles with Fernando, with Lewis, some quite epic battles, as Adam touched on. Brazil 2012 was phenomenal, and Abu Dhabi, the first championship, was excellent. He got away at the start and managed to control the race while Webber and Alonso were squabbled behind, and he was there to pick it all up. So I have great memories of Sebastian when I started watching Formula One, and you go back to his days at Toro Rosso, and that first win in Monza. That was one of the best drives in Formula One. Yeah. To do that at his age in that Toro Rosso was mind blowing. So from start to finish, he's been a real gentleman, a really fast race car driver, and a Formula One legend.
I would completely agree, and I think based off of that last statement, that's a good place to leave it. Lads, that's another season in the books. 2022 Formula One season is now done. Max Verstappen is now a two-time world champion. Red Bull win yet another constructors, and I'm sure in the pre-season, once testing's underway and once we've got a bit more of an idea of what cars are going to perform at what level, we'll get back together and go through a full season preview and our predictions for what 2023 looks like in the Formula One world. But Josh, thank you very much again for joining us, and we'll be back shortly to go through week 11 of the National Football League. Welcome back to Loaded Sport, where myself and Adam are rejoined by Muj, Kemp and Sam to go through week 11 of the NFL. I was going to start off by saying the action that went down in week 11, but I think that would be a massive oversell due to the lack of action that went down. But I am going to start with what for me is the biggest talking point of the weekend, and that is the Minnesota Vikings versus the Dallas Cowboys. I had that pegged in our preview show as the game of the week, and reasons for that being Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins especially, struggled to do it in prime time, and they beat the Bills, and that's all well and good, but it's what they did against Dallas that would really show if they were legit in the NFC or not, and they lost 40-3 points. So they got absolutely battered. So, Sam, I'm going to start with you, mate. Obviously, being a Green Bay Packers fan, you've got a big interest in the kind of performances and results that Minnesota are delivering. What do you think about that game in prime time?
Just typical Cousins, isn't it? Can't do it in prime time. I must admit, I've not really seen much of this game, but every time I was checking in, I was like, how have they not scored? But did it finish with 3? Is that right? They put 3 up. 3
points on the board, yeah.
Yeah, that's inexcusable. But then again, who am I to say anything? We're currently at 4-7, and it's clearly the Vikings division to lose. So No, it's surprising. Don't get me wrong, definitely surprising. I didn't think the Cowboys. I thought the Vikings were probably favourites. Well, they're at home as well.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Cowboys were hammered in. So Vikings started off as favourites, and Cowboys were hammered in. So Cowboys ended up as favourites on the bookies in the end.
Right. Okay. That's surprising that. Yeah, I would have definitely, if I had to pick one of them before the game, I'd have definitely gone Vikings. But especially after the back of that Bills win. But no, they're still comfortable with their division to lose. I think they've got 4 games on us, and they've got 4 games on the Lions and 5 games on us technically because they beat us as well. So yeah, they've got nothing to worry about. Just a blip.
Muj, I know I said there about Sam being interested in Minnesota results, but I suppose that's even more so with you with the Cowboys. Eagles still sit as the number 1 seed, having beat the Colts last night. But Dallas, 7-3, they are a threat. They seem to be getting better. Pollard is just phenomenal at the minute and seems to be getting more and more touches over Zeke, and Zeke only tends to be getting the ball when they're in the red zone. But do you think that Cowboys, by the time the regular season's over, could have overtaken your Eagles in the NFC East?
I will say this. So I watched the game last night with Cowboys Vikings. The only reason before the game has started, I had Vikings winning because of form and also they're playing at home. That Cowboys D-line is legit. Now, I will say this in terms of the Cowboys. I think they're better suited. Ironically, I'm going to say this because they're absolute choke jobs usually. I think they're better suited for the playoffs this year than the Eagles are. So I think we will finish top. But I think the Cowboys are going to be a dangerous team in the NFC this year, to a point where they could reach the championship game. They are loaded. And Pollard has emerged, I think, as a true running back with Zeke. Zeke has always been the short yardage option. He's always been good at doing that. But Pollard is so good. He's so good at receiving the ball. He's a good rusher of the ball as well. He's electric. And I think it's going to be a tough decision for Jerry and Co at Dallas as to what they do with Zeke. Do they trade him away? Do they waive him? Or it'll be interesting. But I think the Cowboys are looking like the real deal this year, and Parsons is the defensive player of the year for me.
Very interesting, very interesting. I think moving on to the second game that I think needs to be highlighted, you spoke in the preview show about our wild card picks for the weekend across all sports. I had the Lions to beat the New York Giants, which they did pretty convincingly in the end. So, Kemp, I'll start with you being a Giants fan. What's happening? Overall, still a good record for the Giants, still in a good position to grab one of those wild card spots in the NFC, but losing 31-18 to a team in Detroit that had only won 3 games up to that stage of the season. How do you feel about the rest of the regular season for the New York Giants?
Take nothing away from Detroit. Fantastic performance from them. They didn't let us breathe. Barkley got barely any yardage. I think I saw him lose yardage quite a few times. Our O-lines looked pretty decent this year, but they couldn't really do much at the weekend, and it was surprising to see. I was watching the Giants, and so many times I've watched in this season, and it's been a close game or we've been losing, sort of going into the third and the fourth quarter. In the second half, we really turn it on. We just couldn't seem to get going. Jones got a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown as well, I believe. But we've got barely any receivers that can cause some real damage. Barkley was snuffed out, and Jones can. He's not the best quarterback in the world. He's perfectly serviceable, but he's not a 10 or even top 15 quarterback in the league, I don't think, really overall, if you think about it. So it's a tough loss. It's a bitter pill to swallow. It's not ideal, but actually, you know what? This stage of the season, 7-3, I'd still take it, and I'm still happy as a Giants fan. We just need to get back on the horse now and make sure that we don't let that result affect us negatively for the rest of the season, because it's been a positive one so far.
Yeah, definitely. And now Detroit go into Thanksgiving playing Buffalo Bills, and they're now off the back of 3 wins in a row. Adam, we've spoken quite a lot about what the Lions need to do. They've invested a lot of early draft picks in their defense, but they were just missing that thing that would get them over the line and get them wins, both this season so far and last season as well. But as I said there, they've now won 3 games in a row. Are they starting to find that missing piece, which was they've got a great team, they just couldn't see it through?
Yeah, I think well, you've got to look at some of the sides that they've faced to get those wins as well, haven't you? I mean, the Bills are a completely different side, and I think despite how they started against the Browns, they dug deep and they got the win against them. I still don't see the Lions getting a win against the Bills. I think Lions still could probably do with, I'm going to say, a quarterback. They've got Jamal Williams now, as I think he's going to have to be their first choice running back. I know he's been doing a lot of it, like we've just spoke about, from short yardage. But I think with Swift, he's a bit injury prone. Last year he got injured and it cost the Lions quite a bit. This year, again, he's struggling, and Williams has come out of the blocks and proven himself as a solid number one choice for them. Defensively, we said that they'd been quite poor, but like you pointed out, we've spoke about on a number of occasions, they've invested quite heavily on their defence, and I think it's just starting to click a little bit more now with the likes of Akuda and obviously Hutchinson. I think he's got a couple of picks in his last couple of games, which for a defensive lineman's quite good as well. I still think there's some way off competing in the playoffs, but I don't think they're too far away from making it to the playoffs, if that makes sense. But you've got to look at the sides in their division as well, haven't you, that they've got to be coming up against: the Bears, the Packers, the Vikings. The Packers at the moment are struggling. The Bears, I'm not quite sure what's going on with their quarterback situation for the rest of the season, based upon what we've heard today. But I think the Bears have the potential of turning a corner ever so slightly and competing at the same sort of level as the Lions. And the Vikings are proving already this year that at the moment they're the best team in that division.
Yeah, and I would agree. And the third game that I want to briefly talk about, Mudge, I'm going to come to you for this one. Kansas City Chiefs in Monday Night Football beat the Chargers 30-27. Patrick Mahomes threw another 3 touchdowns. Travis Kelce had another 3 touchdown receptions. Kansas City Chiefs are currently 8-2 in the AFC, and once this week is over, we'll have the number 1 seed. But I've got a feeling, personally, that they're still going under the radar. Is that true, Mudge? And why do you think that is, considering the performances they're putting in and they're standing in the AFC currently?
I think we've mentioned it before, haven't we, amongst our group chat, but I'm sure I've mentioned it on this podcast as well. Patrick Mahomes is a victim of his own success. Patrick Mahomes, by a country mile, I think, and I'm a diehard Eagles fan, obviously, Jalen Hurts is my QB. Patrick Mahomes is the best QB in the league in terms of he's playing at the best level right now.
100%. He's definitely MVP so far for me.
He has to be the MVP. And I think, although Hurts squeaked out a win for us, he showed a lot of grit, a lot of ice in his veins. Patrick Mahomes is not putting a foot wrong. And, you know, they traded away Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins for, you know, a lot of picks. And, Tyreek Hill was obviously killing it in Miami. People are questioning whether or not Kansas City could be just as potent on offense. And if anything, I think they've taken that offense to a higher level because they're now getting everyone so much more involved. Kadarius Toney, I don't know how they managed to land him, but I think it's going to be a huge piece for them in the years to come. And Travis Kelce, I think, is the best tight end in the league. He's been so consistent over the years. Him and Mahomes have really developed something special. And he's I think he's 14-0 in I think it's primetime games or like divisional games against his rivals in his division. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes has been phenomenal, and Andy Reid is really, really doing something special there. I honestly, if you had to ask me now who's going to win it, I'd say Chiefs win the Super Bowl this year.
Interesting. And yeah, it's quite a strange perspective to look at it. The fact that, as I say, they are 8-2. They are going to be number 1 in the AFC, but there doesn't really seem to be a lot of talk about them. All the hype this year on the AFC side has been about the Bills, and it does still seem to be the case. So it'd be interesting to see just how much they continue to heat up as we enter the back stretch. But we spoke about Patrick Mahomes, and Sam, I'm going to come to you on this one. You know, you're a big Packers fan. Aaron Rodgers, the talent speaks for itself. The legacy speaks for itself, but with the level that Patrick Mahomes is playing at the moment, do you think that by the time it's done, he'd be considered as a better on-field talent than Aaron Rodgers?
Well, all he's got to do is win. That's literally all he's got to do. Talent-wise, he looks there or thereabouts. I mean, they throw the ball very similar. They both got that whip, that effortless sidearm whip. All he's got to do is win, because that's one thing Rodgers hasn't really been able to do. He's got the one ring. If he'd have, put a couple more over his time, I'd still be, even if he'd got 3 rings, I'd still be arguing he's the GOAT. But if you can't, the him and Brady conversation died years ago. So yeah, the Mahomes and Rodgers conversation, I suppose, just win. That's the only thing I can say to him, and just get a couple more rings. I mean, he's already tied him, and he's got an MVP. MVPs, I don't think they really do anything for a legacy.
No.
In regards to your rings, your Super Bowls, your Rodgers can win another MVP. He's definitely not going to win it this year. Don't get me wrong, but what are MVPs? When you win an MVP, it always tells me that there's something else in your game plan that's not working. Because Rodgers is winning all these MVPs, but why is he winning all these MVPs? It's because we haven't had a run game. It's because we haven't had a defense. He's had to put it all on himself. That's why it's probably someone like Josh Allen. He'll probably never win it, or he might pick 1 or 2. But it's because he's got a complete team. He's got probably best defense in the league. He's got a cracking run. He's got a decent run game, and he just has to play at that level. But I mean, Mahomes hasn't really had a decent run game for a while. That Pacheco looks like a decent up they've had now. I think he went over 100 yards.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, yesterday. But yeah, just win. That's all it is. Just get a couple more of them Super Bowls, and I think he only needs probably 1 or 2 more. And I'd be comfortable saying he's had a better career than Rodgers. Why wouldn't you say that?
I think the situation with Rodgers is he is probably the most gifted quarterback we've ever seen play the game. Like, technically, he just looks beautiful when he throws the ball. And he's been efficient. Like, you have to give Rodgers his credit. Like, he has been so efficient over the years. I think the difference is this year is the turnovers are starting to trickle in, and that's so un-Rodgers-like. Like, I think he's had only 2 seasons in his career, apart from maybe this year as well, where his turnovers have gone into double digits. And that is crazy to think. Like, he's obviously had a really long career, and for him to kind of keep up that kind of consistency says a lot about his play. I think like Sam says with Mahomes, I do think Mahomes has been put in a better situation to win from his franchise and his coach. I just think Rodgers has, although he's not the greatest teammate, I don't think he's necessarily been put in the best position to win at Green Bay. They've never drafted an offensive weapon in the first round, so it could have been different had they focused more on offense over the years. But I think like Sam said, Mahomes just has to win, and he'll probably be overtaking him at some point.
Yeah, I think so. And just onto your point about his ball protection on Rodgers, sometimes that has actually been a bit of a hindrance. His refusal to take shots when players, maybe aren't open, when it's a 50-50 ball, and just putting trust in your receivers. That's been his biggest criticisms. I mean, what game was it? San Fran last year when we lost at home in the snow. When he was going deep for Devontae, just because it's his guy, when you looked 20 yards downfield, I think it was like 3rd and 9. Or might even 4th and 9. 20 yards downfield, Alan Lazard was wide open, and instead of choosing the easy path, he went deep for about a 50-yard completion to Devontae, and they were just broken up. And then we were a turnover on down. So yeah, it must have been 4th down. So that's been a big criticism of him. Just put a bit more faith in guys and just air it out a bit more. And I think he's trying to do that this season. That's why his interceptions have gone up a bit, but he's not really had much of a choice. I mean, his supporting cast's pretty average at the minute, although we'll give a shout out to Christian Watson, who over the last couple of games has looked like an absolute beast. Yeah. So fair play to him.
North Dakota boy coming through.
Solid, them North Dakota receivers. Tough as old boots.
He's definitely starting to break out. Multiple touchdowns now over the last few weeks that he's scored. Just very quickly, Sam, because as we said at the start, this is your first recording with us, so you've not really had a chance to talk about the Packers. 4-7 so far this season. As you said, they've not got the best supporting cast for Rodgers. Lost in Thursday Night Football to the Titans 27-17. Matt LaFleur's regular season record has been quite rightly lauded as fantastic since he took over the Green Bay Packers. But other than the receivers, is that what's completely to blame for the downfall this season? What's going wrong in Green Bay?
I mean, to your point on the Titans game, the most frustrating thing about that game was actually the game before then, and it's the fact that we beat the Cowboys 31-28. It looked for everything like we turned a corner in overtime, and we played brilliant. And then the game after, we've just gone and shown our bellies to Titans, and I think they were there for beating, to be honest. But we never once looked like winning that. But no, in regards to this season compared to last, the obvious thing is Devontae. He's left. Rodgers hasn't got that guy that he can rely on. Offensive line's been all over the place. They've been chopping and changing. And a lot of things that not really been spoke about is how many offensive coaching staff we actually lost to the likes of Denver. Obviously, Nathaniel Hackett, when Rodgers had a massive relationship with him, kinky. And there was it was the guy that's gone to the Bears, now the Bears OC. Is it Luke Getsy, is it? He was our quarterbacks coach. So we've lost a big chunk of our offensive room. And Matt LaFleur's obviously got more on his shoulders this year, and I just don't think his play call has been great. And you've seen a couple of times on the sideline with him and Rodgers where Rodgers is completely blowing up at him, which is, ridiculous from a player to do that. But why is he doing that? What sort of play calling is he calling for him to go off on a tangent? I don't know. It's just not it's not a good look for us on the sideline.
Fair enough. We now move on to each of your player of the week. We've got one more game to play tonight at point of recording, which we'll get into the predictions shortly. But what I do want is your player of the week so far. And Kemp, I'm going to start with you.
I think it's difficult. I think you can pick a few players this week, to be fair. There's been some really, really good performances, and I think there's been some difficult choices to make. Pollard, I think, is up there and Zeke for the Cowboys, both sort of balled out with Pollard getting 2 receiving touchdowns, I believe, as well, over 100 yards and 80 yards rushing. So I think I'm going to go with Tony Pollard this week, and I think he's really, really given Jerry Jones and everybody else at the Cowboys franchise something to think about. He's a handful, and he makes me a bit scared. But Tony Pollard for player of the week for me.
Yeah, I'm in. He would have been mine, but as we do with the podcast, we try and pick different players. So while I'm trying to find somebody else, Adam, I'll come over to you for your player of the week.
I've got a couple written down as well, and one of them was Tony Pollard. I'm going to move on and go with my second option, which is the King, Derrick Henry. I think after the last couple of weeks, he has been performing quite well, but he got involved in all 3 sides of the game yesterday. He had 28 rushing attempts. Thursday, sorry. Yeah, no, you're right, Thursday. I'll get there in the end. Thursday, he got involved. Yeah, he got involved every day. He's fine. No, Derrick Henry on Thursday, 28 rushing attempts, 87 yards, and a touchdown. He had 2 targets, 2 receptions for 45 yards, and then got involved in the passing game twice. Both completions, got 4 yards in total, but got a passing touchdown as well. Whether that's just something that's maybe been a bit inspired by everyone talking about how McCaffrey's turned up the heat a little bit. Derrick Henry responding by showing that he potentially is still the greatest running back in the NFL at the moment. So I'm going to go with Derrick Henry.
It's a well-deserved shout. Muj, player of the week for you.
I will give an honourable mention to Aiden Hutchinson, who dominated yesterday. He got a pick, and I'm not sure if he got a few sacks or a fumble recovery, but he was everywhere yesterday. But I will say my player of the week is Travis Kelce.
You son of a bitch.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a die-hard Kelce fan. I think he's brilliant, and anytime he turns up, he'll always get a shout-out from me. So the Big Yeti with 115 yards and 3 tutties. He dominated against the Chargers, as he usually does against them as well. So, that's my player of the week.
Yeah, that's completely fair. He's taken that tight end sort of position up to a level that I don't think has seen such a dominant player since Gronk, doing that level of performance over such a consistent period of time. But yeah, Kelsey's definitely well-deserved. Sam, I'll come over to you for your player of the week.
Yeah, well, I've had to scramble for this one because Mudjibullah gracefully snatched that one right from my mouth. I'm going to go with my guy. I'm going to go with Jamal Williams, former Packer. 3 touchdowns, not blowing, not pulling up any trees with the yard, 64 yards, but 3 touchdowns for me. I'll give my guy some love.
Yeah, that's more than well deserved. I, like yourself, put him on my bench in my work league that I've got, so absolutely gutting. I'm relying on a few catches from DeAndre Hopkins tonight to get me over the line. I'm not quite there yet, which Would have been if started Williams over Foreman for Panthers, but what can you do? I'm actually struggling for a player of the week now, because you've all took the players that I were thinking of, which I think just credits or highlights just how well they played. So I'm going to go a little bit different, and I'm going to give the performance of the week to the Washington defense. Played the Texans, shut them out for quite a long time, ended up letting 10 points, letting the Texans get 10 points on the board. Texans didn't score a touchdown until about 3 minutes left in the game. They had a pick six early on that really set them up, really set Taylor Heineke up, to win that game and take them 6-5. And off the back of that, Heineke will now be the starting quarterback moving forward for the Washington Commanders, despite Carson Wentz being back. So yeah, I'll go with the Washington D as being sort of the team of the week, or however you want to put it, because I'm struggling for a player. We now move on to tonight's game. Monday Night Football sees San Francisco 49ers playing the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to keep it short and sweet with this one. Just a quick bullet point. Who you think will win and by what score? Kemp, I'll start with you. San Francisco, Arizona Cardinals. Who's your pick?
San Francisco for me tonight. I think it's going to be 21-10. I think it's going to be fairly comfortable in the end. I think they've just got too much.
Fair enough. Muj, what about you?
I'll go 27-6 to San Francisco 49ers. I think the defense is obviously elite, so I think they'll cause the Cardinals problems. Yeah, San Fran to win this by a big margin.
Fair enough. I'll go next. In our show last week, I predicted San Francisco to make the Super Bowl after making a mid-season change. I'm going to stick with them getting a win tonight. I don't think it'll be by too much. I will go 23-13 to San Francisco. Sam, who are you going for tonight?
Well, I might have to be a lone wolf here, because I was going to go Niners, but I think every time we've all piled on one team, I think other teams won. I think we did it in the warm-up podcast. I think we all backed the Bengals to beat the Browns, if I remember rightly. Browns did them. So I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to go for the Cardinals. And I'm going to say it's going to be a very low-scoring game. Cardinals win 21-17.
Fair enough. A tight game in Monday Night Football. Adam, I've left you till the end on purpose, with it being a game in your division. 49ers 5-4, Cardinals 4-6. I'm sure you're going to have a very close eye on this, either through the night live or at least when you get up first thing in the morning. With you being a Seahawks fan, who have you got taking this win?
Naturally, I want the Cards to win, because if the Niners win, they're going to go above us in the NFC West. But I do think the Niners are going to win. There's no Kyler Murray, which means it's just going to be made so much easier for the 49ers. And like Mudge has already said, they're a very good defense to go up against, or a very tough defense to go up against, should I say. I've got 24-7 to the Niners.
Happy days, happy days. We'll see what the score is in the morning, or, well, it'll already be out once this is released tomorrow. So that wraps up our weekend preview show. Lads, it's been a pleasure to have you all in for the first time as one unit. Appreciate you all listening to Loaded Sport. And again, as I said at the start, that community forum is there for anyone who wants to just chat the shit about sport, but also if you just need someone to reach out to, we're all there. That wraps up episode 6 of Loaded Sport. We'll be back in the week, later in the week, for the weekend preview show, where I'm sure our main talking point will be that England versus USA game Friday.